We diagnosed your grip with the pistol so you're a more capable shooter. In today's video, what we want to do is diagnose your mount with the rifle. Let's get into it. If you guys are new to the channel, my name's Josh Nelson, and we make videos suited for law enforcement and everyday protectors. So if you see value in today's video, I'd encourage you to subscribe. And if you have comments on future videos you'd like to see, please leave them down below. This video is intended to diagnose your mount to determine if you have quality control over your rifle in terms of recoil management. And we're not gonna get lost in the weeds on various drills we'll showcase in a future video. This video is solely to diagnose if your mount with the rifle is effective or it could be better. The main differences we're gonna experience with the rifle compared to the pistol is gonna be 4 points of contact as opposed to 2. When we have a pistol, obviously we have both of our hands, and so we put an emphasis on that support hand grip. But with the rifle, we have stock in the shoulder as 1 point of contact, dominant hand on fire controls, support hand on the rail, and then my cheek weld on the stock as well. Because of that, there's gonna be more influences we can put into the gun. So when we're shooting at further distances and we're shooting at a predictive pace, we're going to see the wheels fall off if we're not managing those impulses into the gun. So if I'm trying to move the gun all around with the support hand, if I don't have that seated back into my shoulder pocket, and if I don't have a cheek weld onto this gun, it's gonna be another point of contact that I'm giving up to help me mitigate this recoil. The first thing that we want to establish with the rifle, when we're talking about the mount, is getting the stock into our shoulder pocket. There's gonna be really two main ways that are gonna be effective in this regard, and this is going to be the primary way that we're gonna control recoil. So if you're watching too much Instagram of operators going around with like a third of the stock in their shoulder, that's gonna be problematic. This is really non-negotiable for me. So whether I'm center line, right underneath my chin, and then I raise up to find the dot, or I'm more in the shoulder pocket and then encompassing that stock within my shoulder, that is what I want to establish to the point where this thing is fully into my shoulder. Recoil with the bolt carrier group goes forward and back. So with that, we need to make sure that we're mitigating that recoil coming back into our shoulder. A lot of times you'll see guys, if we get lazy with it and I don't roll this shoulder in, I pull it back, you commonly hear that, I pull the rifle back, and now I'm not encompassing that stock, I'm not giving it forward pressure to mitigate that recoil coming back into my shoulder. So now we start to see this thing jump all over the place because I'm opened up, and now the stock, as you can see, is not fully encompassed into my shoulder. So make sure that when you go to the range and we shoulder this stock, whether it's center line or it's in the shoulder pocket, either way, I have that thing fully encompassed into my shoulder so I can mitigate recoil more effectively. This is a non-negotiable. Make sure we're covering up that stock. So in order to demonstrate how much of the recoil management is solely on encompassing that stock in our shoulder without putting too much input into the gun, I'm just gonna do a drill really quick. We're at about a little over 10 yards at this point, shooting an A-zone target. Not too worried about the accuracy, I'm worried about the process. The process that I'm talking about is what is that dot doing in my glass, and do I have a good effective mount with the stock? We'll then talk about how that support hand comes into play and how that can help us mitigate the recoil as well. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fire one round, one-handed, so I can see how much of this gun is effectively controlling that recoil just one-handed. All right, so you guys notice my rifle does move slightly, right? As I pull this trigger, but I'm staying within that A-zone. If I shoot a more predictive pace, the support hand coming into play is gonna allow me to establish that recoil. But if I pay attention to what the dot is doing while I'm pulling the trigger just one-handed, it's staying within that A-zone. So that tells me at 12 yards or so, I'm not leaving that A-zone even while shooting one-handed. So once I start shooting more rapidly and I don't have that control of the rail system up here, of that upper, that's where the support hand is going to come into play and help me manage that. I want to encourage you guys, when you go to the range and you're trying this out, try one-handed. See what that dot is doing and see how much of an effective mount you have just one-handed. And then obviously the rest of it is just weight kind of coming back down as that recoil, as that bolt carrier group slides forward. That's where we start to see the dot moving. But if we talk about just the recoil, that is going to be an effective way to control it. So what does that tell us about what the support hand is doing? Historically, and I've been guilty of this, talked about how the support hand is really controlling the gun. But that's not true. I wanted to ultimately compare this and relate it back to handgun, because so many of our students are handgun shooters first. So when they pick up a rifle, I try to relate this similarly to how I would control the recoil with the handgun, but it's not the same. If we think, all right, this is what's ultimately controlling the recoil stock in my shoulder, this is ultimately steering the gun. So with that being said, I can run into problems if I try to oversteer the gun. So if I put too much input with the support hand, I'm gonna run into all kinds of problems. That dot's gonna go all over the place. And specifically what it's gonna do is I'm gonna fire maybe 1 or 2 rounds, and at some point I'm gonna start hitting left of the target. Now the only reason I would be shooting left of the target is because I'm oversteering the gun with the support hand. So what I want to do instead is I want to find a point on the slide, or excuse me, the point on the upper that I can grab every single time. That can be a foregrip for you. That can just simply be something like this, where I grab the grooves, I curl my fingers over those grooves, and I know that's my point of contact that I want to replicate each and every time. Notice that my palm is underneath the gun. Historically, I've overgripped. I've poked my elbow out, like I've encouraged people not to do. I just drop that elbow down. I curl my fingers over this tactile grip on my upper, and then I slightly pull the gun back into my shoulder. Now notice I'm not talking about, jamming the stock back in my shoulder. I'm simply talking about, I pull it back. I'm not creating a ton of tension. I'm just pulling it back to the point where I feel like I can hold this for a long period of time and also not over control or oversteer the gun. So now that we have our pressures established, I'm gonna shoot a series of doubles at 15, 20, and 25 yards and see where my hits are on the target. This isn't necessarily gonna be perfect accuracy. This is meant to be a diagnosis of my grip. So I'm shooting doubles, meaning one sight picture, 2 rounds, as a way to determine, is my mount as effective as it could be? Every little thing that we put into this gun is going to affect the hits down range. So at 15 yards, I'm gonna stare at that A of the A box. I'm gonna place my red dot over top of it, and I'm just gonna pull the trigger twice. Series of 3, so 6 rounds total, and then we'll assess where our hits are at. I'm gonna make sure that that first shot, I can add difficulty to this by presenting up, but for this part, what I want you to do is stare at the A of the A box, get that first shot perfect, get your mount established, feet set, and then we just pull the trigger twice. All right, let's go down and see where our hits are at. So shooting predictively, I was able to maintain accountability for the A zone at 15 yards. If you have a decent mount, 15 yards shouldn't be too difficult. 10 yards should be automatic. 20 yards is where things get a little dicey, and then 25, obviously, upping the ante. But this is my first 1-2. I was a little high, and then I kind of brought it back down and zeroed in a little bit better. So again, what I'm seeing is bang, bang, and it goes up. So what I did with the next couple, I just simply established that mount a little more effectively. I felt like I needed to put a little bit more pressure in with that support hand. I made that adjustment. And again, using this as a tool, not necessarily an engagement strategy, helps me fine tune where that stock placement should be. Let's back up to 20. All right, now that we're backed up to 20 yards, 5 yards is a big difference when it comes to shooting predictively. So I'm, again, gonna have to really focus in, make sure that stock is mounted in my shoulder, and make sure I'm not putting too much input in the gun with the support hand. All right, felt like, before we go down there trying to call our shots, my first iteration and third iteration, we had a little bit of deviation going high right. Let's see if that's where the shots ended up landing. And then for my first, it was probably a C-zone hit to the right. So we'll see where that's at. So here we notice I was second round of those was perfect. Felt bang, bang on top of each other. 1, 2 for the third one, or for the first one. And then my third iteration, I got a little hairy over here to the right. Again, this isn't something that I want. This isn't the desired effect. However, I feel what good feels like and I feel what bad feels like so that I can try to make those adjustments. Let's run that again at 20 yards and see if we can hone that in and tighten those groups up. All right. Let's check those.
How do those feel?
Pretty good. Yeah, I knew I had one a little bit to the left. So this is why I like 20 yards, because we see a little bit of, you know, you could do it perfectly, but when we're pushing the pace like this, staying within this A zone can be much more challenging at 20 yards compared to the 15. 15, I think, is a good rule of thumb to like start with. However, in 10 yards, I don't personally think you're really gonna learn anything. 20 yards is where we start to see a little bit, I could have made a slight adjustment to fix some of these hits. Ultimately had one barely outside, one C, one high. So what does that tell me? My dot on, I believe the last iteration there was like a circle. So when it's a circle like that, it's not really an issue. It's just a matter of you want consistency. So I had a up and down, up and down, up and down, and then I had like a circle on the last one. So that's a little bit too much like trying to control it with the support hand, too much steering. So not a big deal. We're still accountable within this silhouette. However, I want all those to be A zones. So let's back up to 25, see where we're at with that, and ultimately really try to hone in on some of these fundamentals we've been talking about in this video. All right, now that I've ruined Jake's truck, let's check our hits. Went high right on that first iteration, made the adjustments. I felt pretty good about that at 25 yards, but we'll verify on the target. So overall, pretty solid. Again, that's why this tool is super useful, right? We go boom, whoa, hang on. What do I need to do to make an adjustment? And then we make those adjustments. Like, that's what this drill is all about. And shooting this cold, you know, ultimately, it's how it goes sometimes. But we make those adjustments. As long as we know what we're doing wrong, we can kind of put different inputs into the gun. And at 25 yards, I'm pretty happy with that. It's just a matter of fine-tuning these skills. So this is really a practice drill, a skill builder drill more than it is. It's not an engagement strategy. I wouldn't encourage somebody to shoot at this rate at 25 yards. It's a way to make sure that I know what I'm doing with the rifle and I know how to hold it. And so go out there, shoot some doubles, and improve your rifle mount. Hopefully this video helped. If you found value in today's video, make sure you give us a like. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below, and make sure you subscribe if you want to see future content like this. With that, guys, we'll see you on the next video.
That's fine.
You sure?
Yeah.
Sorry. I can move over too.
Gosh, the truck's from 2009. I don't care.
All right, sorry. Let's try that again.